Hi, my name is Stephanie Phillips. I'm the founder of World Childless Week, and we're here tonight to have an interesting discussion about diversity and policies in employment and how they do affect the childlessness, how basically they do or don't include us. So I'm very quickly going to say, Les, Lindsay and Karen, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's really good to have you here. And I'm now going to pass over to Karen to introduce herself, everybody else, and take you through tonight's webinar.
Fabulous. Thank you, Stephanie. And hello, everyone. And a very warm welcome to this special World Childless Week webinar on the topic of how inclusive are most HR policies towards childless employees. And of course, first and foremost, I want to give a great thanks to the incredible Stephanie Phillips, who is the founder of World Childless Week. And oh my God, Steph, what a week it is this year! Isn't it incredible? So yeah, and I really want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk about this topic during this week. And I just want to say to everybody who's watching and who's in the call with us tonight, none of us are experts in the field of HR. However, we are childless employees, and we are sharing from our own experience with you in this webinar today. So yeah, like Stephanie said, sit back, relax, grab a cuppa, and for me, it's 9 o'clock in the evening, and so I've got my cup of tea here with me, and I'm just really happy to be here tonight. And don't worry, I will be introducing the other people who are here with me tonight in the call in a minute. I just want to get to a little bit of Zoom housekeeping, as Steph has just mentioned as well, that you as a participant of this webinar are not visible, nor will your voice be heard or your questions be seen. So you can just, please feel free to ask any questions. We will not mention your name or anything, so you're safe from that. And I just want to make sure that you can hear us and that you can see us. I believe that we are visible to everyone. Steph, is that all right? Is that correct?
I hope so. If somebody knows about the chat box and just say in there that you can see and hear us, that would be extremely helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So, and how can you participate actively with this webinar? Is that please type in any questions you have either in the Q&A section, and you can see on the screen as well. I've copied a little bit the little box that you can use from the bottom of your screen. You can either raise your hand or just pop something in the chat, and I can see the chat is exploding, Steph.
Yeah.
I actually can't see the chat. Steph is moderating the chat for me.
He's going busy already. I can tell you people are interested in what you have to tell us and what you have to say.
Brilliant. Right, so that's enough about housekeeping, and so here's a little bit of the agenda tonight. We're going to do a check-in and some introductions. We're going to be talking with Les and Lindsay, who I will introduce in just a second, about the Bristol University story, the research into this topic by Katie Schnitzler. Unfortunately, I only just got a message from Katie just earlier this afternoon that she is rather unwell and has been since Saturday, and she has been hoping to get well enough for tonight to join us. However, unfortunately, she really is badly under the weather, and she just simply can't be here tonight with us. So unfortunately, Katie will not be here with us. However, we will mention her work a bit later on in the webinar. And Katie, if you are watching this on record afterwards, we miss you and hope you get well soon. Then we will go into a Q&A check. So we're going to check what questions have come up in the Q&A box in the chat. And after that, we would love to have an open dialogue with you on this topic. And then we're going to look into some practical stuff that actually you can do after having watched this webinar and after having talked about this topic. And please be aware, we've only got an hour. And again, like I said, we're not experts in HR. We are sharing from our own experience. However, I do believe it's a great start to have this webinar, to bring this topic to light and to talk about it in perhaps even future sessions with actual HR experts at the table as well. And I would love to kickstart something like that. So like I said, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the webinar. And again, I will introduce everybody else, but first I would love to hear from you all. So I want to do a quick check-in with you all, just to get an idea of who we have with us tonight and where everybody's dialing in from. So I would love for you to open the chat box and just type in the chat where you're watching us from. So just, you know, type in the chat.
I've seen a few people there from America. We've got Oregon, Waterloo, Portland, Springfield, Maryland, Toronto, Sussex, Calgary. As you can see, there's a lot coming through quickly. So we've got lots in the UK, lots from America. I'm trying to see who else is coming in.
I heard Canada as well there, Steph. That's brilliant. Yeah. Hi everyone on the in the North America time zone. Lovely to have you here, and thank you for taking time out of your day to be here with us for our evening. It's really lovely to have you here. And I also, and of course, also welcome to everybody from the UK and wherever else you're dialing in from. Again, I can't see the chat. I'll have a look at it later, but it's just thank you for sharing. Anything outstanding there, Steph? Anybody dialing in from a very tropical?
We've got Italy as well. We've got Italy here.
Buonasera.
So I'm sure there will be other countries, but I must admit they went so fast. Possibly
brilliant.
Them, but yeah.
Well, thank you all for sharing that with us, and I hope you can all see the chat so that you also get an idea of actually who is here with you tonight as well, just to get a feel of the magnitude actually of the reach of World Childless Week this year alone. It still mind boggles me, and to be really honest with you, I've been rather nervous for the last 2 days to kick this off, but again, really happy to have you here. So, as mentioned, finally, the introductions. We were supposed to have Katie Schnitzler here with us tonight as well. As mentioned, Katie is unfortunately unwell. However, I do want to give her the space here tonight because she has been very much involved in the preparation for this webinar. So, Katie, she is a training specialist on the topic of pregnancy loss and childlessness within the workplace, and she runs a lovely organization which is called MIST. And she provides training and support actually to organizations, to corporations, especially to HR teams and management leadership teams on the topic of childlessness in the workplace. And Katie is actually conducting a PhD study, research study on this topic at the Open University. So she really is quite a subject matter expert on this topic. So again, I feel really, really sorry that she's not here with us tonight, but I'm sure in the future we'll have the opportunity to bring her into a next session on this topic. Then who we do have with us here tonight is the lovely Lindsay Bishop. Hi Lindsay, it's good to see you here tonight. Thank you for being here with us. And Lindsay's worked for the Bristol University for nearly 20 years, and Lindsay has been very heavily involved together with Les to actually set up the HR, to instigate the discussion with for the HR policy on childlessness as a diversity and inclusion topic at the Bristol University. So Lindsay, it is absolutely lovely to have you here. And also Lindsay and I know each other very well from the Gateway Women community, of which we are both an active part of. So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Karen. Hi to everybody. It's great to be here, even though a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah, Lindsay, I just keep telling myself, just keep breathing, and the same goes for all of us, I think. And then, of course, we have the lovely Les Finmore here with us as well, who is a direct colleague of Lindsay, also at the University of Bristol. And Les has, he is leading the human resource diversity analysis. So Les has actually been also very heavily involved in setting up the HR policy around this topic. And I'm really happy to have you also here, Les. And also, I'm really happy also that you are representing the male group of childless men in this call tonight here. Very important also for World Childless Week, because quite often men are overlooked when it comes to this topic. So I'm really happy to have you here in this call with us tonight as well.
Yeah, glad to.
Thank you so much, Les. And of course, I'm Karen. For those of you who don't know me, I am Karen Enfield. I am the Operations Director for Gateway Women, next to my corporate job as a change management consultant for a large corporation in the Netherlands. and I joined Gateway Women as a member about 4 or 5 years ago, and I joined Jodie Day, the founder of Gateway Women, at the beginning of this year, before the whole pandemic kind of took over the world. I joined her as the operations director, and I've been a World Childless champion, World Childless Week champion. This is now my 2nd year as a champion. So Steph, honestly, again, thank you for giving me the platform here and for including me in this wonderful week. And I am childless after cervical cancer, and I have been struggling also with finding my own space and letting my voice be heard as a childless employee in big corporations for the last 8 years, and so a topic close to my heart as well. And so those were the introductions, and what I would like to go to now is so why this webinar? Why do we need to talk about this topic? We've thought about this quite a lot, and there's a lot of stories that go that are flying around, not just in the Gateway Women community, but also, you know, on forums, on Facebook forums, on childless Instagram pages, even speaking to colleagues at work. As why do we need to talk about this topic? And what I've noticed is, as we see an increase in the number of men and women who are childless by circumstance, and which I actually prefer to use the term childless by circumstance rather than childless not by choice, because it feels a bit more inclusive. But the numbers are increasing on a global scale, and therefore there's also an increase in the number of employees around the world who are childless by circumstance. So the need for this group to be included in HR's diversity policies is growing too. So it's kind of like, it's almost like a snowball effect. The numbers are increasing, and there's more and more need to be seen and to be heard and to be understood as childless employees. And it's actually not just for those who are childless by circumstance, not just for people in our situation. I also actually would love to extend that to people who suffer from pregnancy or fertility loss. Because for me, I am beyond the hope of ever becoming a parent. However, I can also imagine that when you talk about the HR policy around this topic, that you can't just focus on just childlessness. You also kind of need to be you actually need to be inclusive there, and also include that demographic. And one thing that stood out for me as well is that we should not assume that all organizations around the world, or every employer, actually has a diversity and inclusion policy in place. And if they do, what we have seen also is that the strategy is often to pursue like the so-called priority areas that everybody kind of knows when you talk about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Quite often people talk about gender and racial diversity, LGBTQI, this/ability diversity groups, women groups, and all that kind of stuff. And whilst being inclusive should of course apply to all diversity groups, no matter how small they are. It should be about the inclusivity. And too often, the smaller groups that people don't know much about, they're often left hidden in the margins. So that's why we wanted to talk about it. So that's why we wanted to talk about this topic here today. Steph, just so I know, just a quick check, any urgent questions so far that we need to address right now before I go to Les and Lindsay?
No questions.
Sorry, darling?
There's no questions, actually, just a case that people bring up the fact that childless and single are both issues, and somebody's mentioned, don't they just focus on the 9 protected characteristics? So like you say, there's more than 9, and that's what we're obviously trying to say, we need to be recognised, so we're number 10 plus more out there, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, numbers of, like I said earlier, numbers of childless employees are increasing. I think on average it's like 20% of any population are childless people, whether it's childless or child-free. Yeah. So of course another addition to this topic that we also need to take into consideration are the child-free members of that group as well. Even though they might be child-free by choice, you know, they still can fall into, they still are often faced with the same stigmatizations and the same responses that they get also in the workplace. So I think it needs to be really that inclusive.
Definitely. Because at the end of the day, sorry if it's me getting feedback. Les, can you turn your microphone off? We can maybe resolve if it's me or you getting the feedback. But yeah, as you say, childless, child-free, we still get the same judgments made against us that we've got the free time. It can be available to suit everybody. So it's definitely going to have to be something that includes anybody who's childless for any reason, by choice or not.
Yeah, absolutely, Steph. Completely agree with you on that one. Thank you very much. And so without further ado, I would love to give the show over, the floor over to Les and to Lindsay. So let me give them a warm welcome. They're both from the Bristol University in the UK, and they will share their story about how they got to an actual HR policy on childlessness. And what I will do is stop presenting my slide deck for now. So just Les and Lindsay will appear on your screen as well to talk about this.
Hi, is that better for feedback? I've put my headset on, but I can't tell. Is that better for everybody?
I think if we would just try and do it so that it's only one of us talking at a time, then hopefully that will solve that problem.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Karen, for the introduction. It's great to be here. Like I said, I don't work in HR. I'm just going to talk about my journey and how I got to this point and how I got to this day where I've appeared on a webinar internationally talking about this subject. So my journey probably began much earlier, but like most childless women, I remained unaware for some time. I just became gradually more disillusioned with my life and many of the people around me. And then it was about 4 years ago, while me and my husband were talking to a counsellor about a completely different subject, because at this point I thought that the completely different subject was why I was feeling the way I was. And it was only when the counsellor said, oh, no, it's nothing to do with that. It's because you're childless. And then it was almost like she opened a huge can of worms. And I think my journey began. So my journey to try and get through to a place where I could accept my position and also try and move on with my life, because at this point I think I'd lost my purpose, like most people probably find. It's like, oh, okay, what is my purpose then if I'm not going to be a mum? So I worked on that. I did counselling, hypnotherapy, yoga, various things, and that's helped me personally, but I still found within the workplace things weren't quite right. And I think it had become apparent to me that my peers and my colleagues around me, because I've been there 20 years, when I got there I was a bit of a young whippersnapper just enjoying going out, and then obviously my peers and colleagues slowly got older with me, and they started to make their pregnancy announcements and come in and show me their scans, and I didn't want to see their scans, but I didn't really know why I was reacting that way. And when I did know, I couldn't say. So I suddenly realized that they were moving on and I was just remaining standing still in my job. Nothing was changing. They were meeting new people, they were having babies, they were then just going part-time, and my life was just rolling on, and I was becoming sort of more and more disillusioned. But it was only when I was talking to a colleague about this that I sort of realized that during this time I met my partner. So I started to do a PhD part-time, and this took 6 years. So at this point I'm in my mid-30s, started my PhD. And if you ever need a bucket of sand to shove your head in about childlessness, then a PhD is a great place to go, because I found that I could just fill my mind with it. And I'm working in a science environment. It's very sort of driven with research. And so I stuck my head in the sand, and during that time I met my partner. But I think in the back of my mind it was like, yeah, you're going to finish your PhD when you're 40, you're going to get married, so I was getting married that year, and you're going to have a baby, and you're going to ride off into the sunset, and you're going to live happily ever after. No, that didn't happen, and all of a sudden at 42 I was like, oh, this hasn't happened, and it's not working out, and I'm still in the same job, and things aren't changing. And so I was sat talking to this colleague saying disillusioned, and she said, oh, why don't you look at changing your work hours? And I was like, well, I can't really live with that much less money. But she said, oh no, you can change your work hours to do a 9-day fortnight. So you do the same hours, you work more hours each day, and you can get 1 day off a fortnight. And I was like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. I thought you could only do that if you had caring responsibilities, you had children, or you had people to look after. I didn't know you could just do that. And she was like, no, that's a policy at university, everyone can do that. And I was like, oh, why didn't I know that? You know, I hadn't become aware of it. So I applied, and I asked my manager, and the manager went through the things, and I went to my 9-day fortnight. It's great. I suddenly had this day that I could do for myself. But at that time, I was still having quite a lot of therapy, so I would have my therapy on that day. So it was a way that I could fit that in without having, because asking for time off as well, having to ask for time off to go to your therapy means you have to admit what's happening to you. So having to say to my line manager, can I have every Thursday off to go to see my therapist, was hard. But I had a really good manager. She understood, and she said, yeah, you can do the 9-day. So off I went, and this is what happened. And then during that time, the Elizabeth Blackwell Institute, who do research in health, were doing some work looking at scientists and equality and diversity issues. And they were asking people in science, you know, what issues there were. And I found myself in a meeting with a lady from them, talking generally, because I was, as well as working in the lab, I was the equality and diversity lead for the dental school where I was working. So we were talking, and I felt you just get a feeling for the people. And I just thought, oh yeah, I'm going to tell you. So I told her, I said, well, you know, this is my personal journey, and this is how I feel a bit about things. And she said, oh, that's really interesting. Do you mind if I take that back to the BDI, the Equality and Diversity team? And I was like, yeah, I'm happy for you to do that, but I don't want to be named, because I'm not ready to come out. I just want them to know. So she went back to Equality and Diversity team and told them about it, and they were quite interested in the story and taking it further. And after a few meetings with this colleague, and interestingly, this colleague, I don't know, might sound weird, some people have 3 children, and for some reason it felt okay that I was asking the person who had children to carry forward this issue for me, because it felt like I wasn't banging my own drum. I don't know. That's just how I personally felt. So in fact, I was hiding behind this work colleague with the 3 children, who was very empathetic and able to put my story forward. So eventually I built up the courage, kept watching Jodie Day kind of giving these talks and things. And I was like, you will build up the courage to come out. I came out a tiny bit, and I agreed to meet with the Equality and Diversity team just to talk about things. And that's when my life changed, and I met Les Finmore, who, my co-host here, who happened to be part of the team at the time, and we were introduced to each other, and we decided to form, and I don't know what you call it, Les, not an alliance, but we decided to take things to the next step. And so the first thing that we went on to do was to create a web page.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that I never really thought of myself as childless until I met Lindsay. I'd been married, and I'd tried for kids, and we hadn't been able to have kids. We got as far as IVF treatments. We kind of gave up. That was back in the kind of mid-90s. Kind of gave up because life stopped being fun, and my wife went off and became a nursery nurse. And then my kind of career took over, and and I ended up doing a lot of traveling. I got involved in events, in change management. I don't know whether you saw my intro, that I've got one of the most random career paths that anyone can possibly have, which has been amazing. But actually, probably at the same time, I've never really been in a position since then to have kids, and any of the relationships have never been of those kind of relationships. So I just happened to be in a role that that my colleague Lauren, who Lindsay just mentioned, she came to see me and said, "Les, I've got somebody who wants to talk about childlessness." And I was like, "Okay," because we don't have anything like that here. And I thought, well, yeah, let's meet and let's talk it through and see what happens. And bizarrely, yeah, listening to Lindsay's story kind of made me think about some of the things that maybe I feel, and probably made me realise that I'm sort of childless some days and child-free others. And I suspect there's probably a lot of people, especially maybe of male persuasion, who feel like that. And that sometimes my own kind of issues around seeing badly behaved children is a little bit of that kind of thing. So we sat and we met and we talked it through, and we, as Lynn said, our kind of initial thought was, yeah, let's just set up a website. Let's just have something that people can go to as a resource to support childlessness. So one of the things we talked about was setting up just a page of things that people can do to support people who are childless. So things like the baby boards and announcing pregnancies and stuff like that. What I would say is that I did work in the diversity team. The diversity team were really positive about this. And I am aware that, I mean, that they are, I think that's something that maybe really helped us to take things forward. So we started thinking about the web page. When again, I'm not really an expert on policy. I mean, it's interesting. We've been asked about our policy, and actually, really, all we did was we created a website. We ran it past a few people. We put it up on a web page, and we're aware that people are using what we've done, which is pretty amazing from our point of view as well. So when we'd done that, we then thought, well, given like Lindsay's experiences and probably mine as well, and we're also we kind of suspect that, especially in an academic world, there are significant numbers of people who've probably put their careers first, a bit like me really, although I'm not an academic. And that potentially that is the circumstances and situation of childlessness. You know, it could be kind of a key thing within academia. So we then thought, well, why don't we set up a network? Why don't we just have a meeting? So we kind of booked a room. One of the things that we did think about, and probably the main thing we thought about, was anonymity, as we've done here with this session. People are anonymous. Lindsay I kind of ended up fronting the organisation because I'm probably, let's say I'm kind of more upfront about things in my world. And Lindsay was still coming to terms with it, weren't you? So, but all we did really was we booked a room. We organised some refreshments. We sent it out through a few newsletters and our university weekly bulletin. And we kind of jokingly said, didn't we, Linz, that, well, at least there'll be two of us there. And actually, people did turn up. I'm not saying loads of people did, but the door, it was about 10 minutes in, wasn't it? And suddenly the door opened. And it was somebody looked in and went, is this the Childless Network? And we were like, yes. And that's kind of how it started, really. What did happen though, although we had a few people come. In fact, I was talking to one. We actually had our meet up this afternoon. But one of the people, because I was talking about what we were going to talk about, and they said, yeah, I was there. And I was like, yeah, that's the kind of thing that happen. But what we also did start to get was emails. Well, I got emails because I'd put my email address on as the main contact because we hadn't got anything else. We hadn't really thought we kind of hadn't really thought beyond, let's have a meeting and put something on a web page. But then we started to get emails from people and that was kind of things like saying, this is amazing, we're so glad you're here, this is really important, but I'm unable to talk about this to anyone else, But also people saying, who are you? What do you mean by childlessness? What does childlessness mean? To which we were like, well, we don't know really, because we don't know who's going to be involved. You mentioned it earlier, Karen, that actually we've now got, we ended up creating a mailing list. And on that mailing list, we've got people of lots of different ages. We've got people who are trying for children, are unable to have children, have had miscarriages, are going through IVF. In fact, one of the group, we ended up having to support quite a bit with the policy, and again, brilliantly, our university are keen for us to get involved in looking at that policy and seeing what we can do to support that. So we have been supported really well. Once we'd had a meeting, we thought, well, we might as well try and run them once a month. We created a mailing list, and I've kind of set up a little mail out that I send to people, which involves things like what's happening in Childless Week, any articles we see, any information we get from researchers. Because the more we started to look, the more we started to realise that there wasn't anything else really. So it's kind of up to us to do that, and that is kind of where we were. And it's funny because on the 16th of March, Linz and I met in a cafe, didn't we? And we were talking about where we're going to go next. We kind of were thinking, well, why don't we try and do something for World Childless Week? It'd be really good if we could put an event on or get a speaker or whatever. And we also were talking about how we're going to take things forward. We've got the possibility of a senior champion within the university who can support us. But again, we don't want to just bring them in without really helping them to understand what their role is within that. We kind of need a charter, because as a network, we need to know what we stand for. We're still learning that ourselves. Again, what I said before. But on the 16th of March, we're kind of joking, and then kind of just a week later, everything had completely changed, hadn't it, Linz? It was just like, oh, what do we do now?
At this point, I haven't mentioned that I joined Gateway Women about the same time as I launched myself into my journey. And about a year ago, I became the co-host for the Bristol meetup group. So I had a lot of experience from the meetup groups, and also a lot of advice and experience from the Gateway Women. So that's where I would go for advice when we're looking to put things on our webpage, or when we were looking to create our meetings, because I'd learned, what sort of environment women want to meet up in our situation. So by that time, the Gateway Women Bristol group had gone online, and we have been hosting meetups every fortnight, and we would get at least 9 members turn up every fortnight, and they've been successful. So we were like, okay, well, it works for Gateway Women meetup, so let's give it a go for the University of Bristol Childless Staff Support, which I think it's quite scary turning up in a room, but turning up on a Zoom meeting is pretty scary. So we weren't sure again, was anybody likely to turn up? Because, if you've not been before, you're turning up, you don't know who we are. We're just Les and Lindsay, sort of, because obviously I would come out, I'm always hiding behind Les. So we did it online, and we have 1 or 2 members, I think, turn up, Les, but it was a start, and we would meet up with people and we would chat. And so we said, okay, this is working. So we've continued our meetings now online with the group, and sometimes it might be 3 of us and sometimes more of us, but we're there. If people want to come and they want to talk to us, then we're there. And so that's where we're at with the meetup groups. But I think a key thing for the network, for myself and Les. And I think a personal key thing for me is raising awareness. It's raising awareness amongst the staff at the University of Bristol that this is an issue for some people, so that they might think when they go to announce a pregnancy, or they might think when they're talking about something in the office, showing off their scan, before they do it, they might think, oh, so-and-so next to me hasn't got children, I wonder why that is. We don't want them not to do it, we just want to raise awareness, or give us chance not to be in the office. If someone wants to bring in their new baby, that's brilliant, but just give us warning so that we can choose whether to be in the office or not. So it was things like that. But what was becoming apparent, and I went to Fertility Fest last year, and there was a talk from a PhD student, I think from Japan, about her PhD in research into childlessness. And I was like, oh, hold on, this is actually academic research is going on here. And we're the University of Bristol, we're Russell Group University, we are about research. I think people will sit up and take notice if we give it some kudos with the research background. And also, it's quite interesting. So how can we raise awareness to our staff? Well, let's start to get people to come in and talk about their work. So we talked about who we're going to get to come and talk at the University for Childless, World Childless Week. And so we contacted a researcher from Cardiff University who is coming along to the university this week to give a talk on her research. And I think for me, if no one turns up to the meeting, but everyone has seen in our staff bulletin that there is a research talk about childlessness going on this week, then that's brilliant, because a few people have had their awareness raised. And for me, that's what matters the most, because not everyone needs to come to a meeting to talk about it or to support to it. But I think the people around us, if they have their awareness raised a bit, then we've achieved something. And that's my personal goal and our joint goal with the network.
Yeah, so, I was going to say, Lynn, one of the things that we've kind of learnt along the way is that that actually we very quickly learned that we're the only kind of workplace organised network in the country, and that suddenly we were getting requests from other researchers. I've noticed a couple of other people on the webinar who've been in contact with us, who are undertaking other pieces of research. And that for us, one of the things we've learned along the way is that we've had nobody really we've had support from our university, but we haven't really had anyone else who set a network up, and that's been really tough, because we've had to learn to accept that we make mistakes along the way. And what we hope is that anyone who is thinking about doing this, anyone on this call who is going to approach their organisation, feel free to talk to us, because we've learned a lot of mistakes and things we'd like to do better, and things we would like to, and perhaps we may have done differently. But for us, as the kind of people doing this, we've had nobody to really talk to about it. I'm not sad about that, because it's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey. But yeah, it is kind of challenging as well. So I really would advise people to try and network your network as such.
I think we're incredibly lucky that the university are very strong on EDI, and so we come from a strong background. But when we first went into lockdown, and we had one of the university live streams where the senior team addresses the whole university, and there was a parent that said, I've got to homeschool, can I be furloughed? And the senior team said, well, anyone can apply to be furloughed, but we're all equal, and the cases will be equal. We have to think about staff that don't have children as well. We can't just furlough staff with children. And it made me think, yeah, we've reached the senior team, and there's awareness there that the university are thinking about people like us when making these decisions. So I feel like we are getting somewhere. So we've made a list, Les, is that right? We've made this list of what we've learned so far on our little journey. I'm just going to read out. I hope you've not put anything dodgy in here, Les.
No.
what our list of things that we've learned. So our main goal is to support and educate and raise awareness. We may have to do things we're not good at, and that's mainly advertising and social media, because it's very hard to advertise when you don't want to be the face of something, because quite a lot within the university internal network, if you want to, we have a thing equivalent of Twitter, which is called Yammer, but you can't tweet or yam, don't know what it is, without your face and your being the person you are. We can't tweet from our network, so it's very difficult to say, oh, this is happening, and it just comes from the Childless network. So, and of course, going on lockdown, there's nowhere to put a poster up. You can't just put a poster up in the building. The only way we can advertise is through email or through bulletins. So we're still doing that, and I'm sort of Les has to front most of that. So we have to do that, and we have to fit it with our day job. And we both work full time for the university, so we're fitting in, doing all of these things around our sort of busy jobs. So we've found that's quite tricky, but there is allowance within our job roles, within our managers. Yes, of course you can do it, but of course we still have to fit it in. So that's one of the things. You need to have some support from you within your workplace. We've been lucky, we've had senior management, we've had the diversity team, network and inclusion group support, which will both participate. We're relying on others, so we rely on other members of staff. So if we want something to be advertised, or we want our web page changing, we rely on members of staff doing that for us. And sometimes that goes a bit awry. They might put us in the wrong section. To begin with, we didn't have our own section in the web page. We weren't like, it wasn't like parents and parenting, and then BAME, and then disability, and then childlessness. We appeared under the mental health section, and so we were like, oh no, we're not. We are. It's an aspect of being childless, but it doesn't mean it it's not because of mental health. So things like that, we have to sort of help point them in the right direction. We're needed, and sometimes message from one of the groups or someone within the workplace seeking support or advice, and that does make it worthwhile. And I saw this week, we put an advert out for our guest speaker speaking on Thursday, and we had 3 people write to us this week and say, can we join the network? So I was like, brilliant. We've reached 3 more people in the university, and they're obviously, reaching out to us. So it was quite emotional, as actually when I read that today.
Yeah, Lindsay, I was going to say one of the things we have done, which initially we were just using my email address, which meant that like emails about childlessness, which can sometimes be really sensitive, we're also going in with my emails about, oh, can I have this bit of data, or can you answer this question? So it's Lindsay set up we set up a generic email address, and again, that's something that we did fairly early on, and that's been really useful, because it also means that it's not just me checking emails. We've got both of us who can access stuff. And then, as you say, just one email that says thank you. Somebody put in huge capitals, thank you for being here, even though we haven't really done anything for that person. And again, that just kind of makes it worthwhile. And like Lynn says, it's kind of quite emotional, isn't it?
Yeah, guys, I'm sorry, Lindsay. I'm just cautious of time.
Oh, yeah.
We're running a little bit over time, and because I do want to give the opportunity also to go to Q&A and to answer some questions that have popped up in the chat. So maybe just 1 or 2 more examples from your side, Lindsay, and then we go to the Q&A. Is that okay?
Yeah, I've got one left to go, and that was just that. Yes, I was really surprised when we set out on our journey that we couldn't find anyone else with a staff network that we could sort of talk to. So we'd love it if there were more staff networks that we could interact with, and that we'd like to still raise awareness within the university, because we get a bit of interest now from people outside the university, and it's almost like we have a greater awareness from outside than we do from within. So yeah, we're still building that awareness within the university, and we couldn't have done it without some of our colleagues at the university. But that's the end of my list so far. Thanks.
Wow, Lindsay, Les, what a truly inspirational story. And of course, you know, I've been aware of this for quite some time now, of this whole policy. And yeah, I still find it so amazing, and also so actually really heartwarming to actually hear that the support that you guys got from the university on this as well, because I also know plenty of examples of people who have tried within their respective organizations to actually make this a topic, to raise this with their, either even just their departmental HR manager, or with a trust person within the organization, or even with a company doctor, to talk about all these kind of topics. And they've always been kind of met with you know, misunderstanding, with oh well, why do we need this, why is this such an issue for you, you know, just get on with things. And also here I have plenty of examples also of kind of like the bingos, even in the workplace, that surround this topic. So I really am incredibly envious of your employer, to be honest with you, for being so incredibly open and understanding towards your initiative. And Lindsay, honestly, thank you for stepping up. And I know it's been a tricky journey for you, and I know how much you were like, I don't know if I want to come on a webinar about this, but I am so proud of you. And also, Les, I am so proud of, you know, being there for Lindsay, but also just, you know, taking this to the next level, and also for standing your ground as a childless man in this story. Yeah, absolutely incredible. And so thank you so much. And I'll come back to some more examples of other people who have also gone to their HR manager to see what happened there. But first, in view of time, we've got about 10 minutes left. I would love to go to the Q&A section. So Steph, you mentioned that you had you tracked the questions in the chat. So shall we start with those, and then we'll go to the Q&A box?
Yeah, we've got several lovely comments as well that I want to read out to you, because I think it shows how important it is what you're doing. And sometimes starting at the basic level, same as medium well childless, but you don't realise where it can lead to. And just getting a few people supporting you and giving them the courage to actually carry on and do that where they work is a really big thing. You've got, like I said, you've got one. I'm an employee at Bristol Uni. When my childless journey started abruptly 2 years ago due to a diagnosis that meant one of the consequences was infertility 2 years ago, being able to point my manager and colleagues in the direction of the existence of the Childless Network and the web page they created was invaluable. Thank you. So it just shows you don't know who you're reaching, and I think that's the really important thing about a lot of these situations. Someone else has said, Les and Lindsay, are you also including employees who are childless by circumstance, which may be because of reasons other than fertility, such as simply not meeting up with a partner? I assume that is something you cover. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I saw a message, so I picked that one up here, and we've not really excluded anyone, because we don't really know who we represent as such, and we've never said to anyone, "Oh, you're not welcome." I think we've kind of just said, if we hope that people get it, and that's kind of where we've come from. But in terms of that question, I can think immediately of at least one member of our group who is in that situation. So yes.
Well, considering most people are childless by circumstance rather than fertility, it's an automatic for me inclusion that however you got there. I always say, if you're hurting your heart because you didn't have a child, then you're childless, and it doesn't matter the reason behind it. You're in our sort of community. We want to try and support you and help you in any way. Another comment is, as a member of Bristol University D&I team, I want to say a huge thank you to Lindsay and Les for shining a light on an area of diversity that is so often overlooked. So again, another lovely compliment for you. The next one. I've managed to wedge in the issue of childlessness within a staff network we have about menopause by writing an article about menopause after childlessness. It got some traction, it's picked up by a linked blogger, so I'm hoping that might raise awareness, and they've actually sent the link to me, so I'll share that again across the website as well, because any way that we can use something that's already recognised and acknowledged in the slightest way to get childless in there as well, I think is really valuable.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, what else have we got there? We've got quickly about this. I'm retired now, but I would love to see if any of the people I knew in HR are still around and send them a link to this webinar. Do you know what I mean? So again, people want to share this and it will be shared. I can guarantee that big time. Next one is, I will be starting a MHRM program next fall, and I feel that I'd be able to help bring awareness to the issue in America, because so far diversity and inclusiveness training does not include the childless or child-free populations, at least not that I'm aware of. And she said, I find this webinar so intriguing. So if we're doing stepping stones, not just in the UK, but across the world as well, and I think if anybody gets any information or resources, you can send it back to any of us, that we can sort of unite it and get a really strong idea of fact sheet of what people can do, what are the wrong things to do, what are the right things to do, the lists that you mentioned, the people then go and think, okay, I won't try it that way, but perhaps I'll try it this way. That's going to be a benefit. Right, going into the questions, we've got some in the question panel, but there's one I spotted straight away on here. Let me just quickly find it. It says, what advice do you have for diversity and inclusion teams that are not being inclusive and actually excluding childless and child-free employees from their strategies? Is that something you've come against? You can advise on. It's a tough one.
Yeah, that really is a tough one, and that's also been my experience with my previous employer, who I left 3-4 years ago. That they were not responsive and not open at all to my even just to my simple question, like why is there no policy on childlessness in this organization? And it was a huge company that has over 150,000 employees worldwide, and you know, there was nothing. And so and like I said, I was met with like, well, why do we need to make this a policy? So, and this was about, like I said, 3-4 years ago, so I wasn't as advanced in my childless journey as I am today. So I also felt a little bit like, do I want to put myself on the spotlight here? Am I going to be the person who's going to kind of, you know, kick up a stink about it? Trust me, I'm in that place right now, so I am happily kicking up a stink with my new employer about this. And actually, when what I've actually done, and this might be a really good tip for those of you who have a similar question as well, is that I have used the example of the Bristol University, and I've written an email to go with that, and it's actually became well, especially within the Gateway Women community. But I'm happy to share it with Steph, so she can include it with the recording of this webinar afterwards. An email template that quite a few women have now used within their to send to their HR department, and I was met, and some of the other women as well. We were met with actually compliments about the research that had gone into it. Obviously, research university, Bristol, you know how to do your research. So that really was, so it was a real fact-based, well-built documentation that really kind of made my HR manager actually go, I really can't ignore this anymore. We really need to look into this. And within 2 days, my email to the chief of HR for the organization I now work for, who has about 50,000 employees worldwide, it was shared within like the entire HR community, and it's now actually being discussed as part of their diversity and inclusion policy. Of course, the COVID-19 pandemic kind of put a delay a little bit on that, because they had other priorities, which of course I understand. But you know, so there are some really good examples on how to address that and really underpin your story with the facts, so that it doesn't become just your own emotional or your own personal emotional story, but that you also have facts to kind of back you up with that, so that you can always refer to that. And that has made a real big difference for quite a few people to actually speak up about this.
I think that is sometimes it's having some knowledge behind you, so that you can actually go in and say, I know this.
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
a fact. That makes a difference.
Yeah.
You've actually got 6 questions in the Q&A box now, if you want to go on to them. Yeah,
I'm just going to have a quick look. So there is a question that, so why would you, that's kind of, I've just answered that question. Someone says, just thinking about how fab it would be to open something like this to mature students as well. I think a lot of childless people would consider going to uni to get a degree or for a change of career.
It's open to all, everybody, so we're open if students did find and want to join us. Yeah, we're open.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. So what resources outside of your own experience have you felt were most helpful in educating you to better position yourself to provide advice and guidance to those who were seeking it?
Gateway Women, I think. That was a real help in advice and looking for ways to seek advice. And
I would also, I'm a little bit biased, of course, about Gateway Women, but there is a great, also on the website of Gateway Women, there's a great resource list as well, where you can just kind of browse through, also looking at HR policies and stuff. There is lots of information on the Gateway Women website, and of course there's a lively discussion in the online membership community as well. But if you don't want to dive into that yet, that's absolutely fine. And of course, now you've seen us on this webinar as well, so please feel free to reach out to us. Someone says, what do you do when people don't get it? I think what I mentioned earlier, really just use that template email and base it or back it up with facts. That always helps to kind of underpin your storyline. I was interested in Les's reference to having a generic email address for people to use. Were there ever times when you had to forward those emails to HR or somewhere else? Or were you always able to deal yourselves with the questions and comments that you got directed to that email address? I.e., was the address specifically advertised as confidential? Les, do you...
Yeah, we've made sure that people are aware it's confidential, and what we've kind of said to people on our mailing list, that it's confidential between ourselves. Nobody else can see that. In terms of most of the questions, sometimes, no, there have been times where we've directed things back to, and often back to the diversity team again, who are there, who have been really supportive. So that's been really useful. There's nothing that we've had to go any further with, but there have been times where we've just been able to support someone, maybe offer some advice, and then ask them to let us know how they've got on, if there's anything else we can do. That's the kind of stuff at the moment. Maybe going forward, the more people we get to know, that may happen. But Lindsay, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just noticed in the chat, someone saying that it's been heartwarming and hopeful. I think a major barrier is shame. And I think that a lot of childless men and women do feel shame, and it's one of the things that hold you back. And I remember recently saying to some of the Gateway meetup, I've got a new line manager. I'm going to be telling my line manager about my situation so she knows when I'm not, when I'm not quite right. And they were like, oh, you're going to tell your manager? I thought, well, yeah, because I think then she'll know when I've got anxiety, whatever, where it's coming from. And they were like, oh, I couldn't tell my manager. And I think it's a major barrier. And I think a good part of it would be, it's part of management training. It comes in when people become managers and they have to look at all the issues involved with management and diversity, that managing this or skills in it would be part of the management training, so that they're aware of it, so that people don't feel they can't bring it up with their manager, because that's the first barrier. You can't take it any further if you're too shy or too ashamed to want to talk about it. But if you can find a colleague, find a colleague that might have children, that might carry that voice for you, might be able to send it on your behalf. Find someone that can help me, and that's what I did, and that's what helped me get to that place. One day I obviously want to be like Jodie doing a TED talk, but until then, I will continue to inch forward to be able to. I'd like to be able to give a talk at the University of Bristol. I'd like to be able to stand up and say, this is my story. We have equality and diversity conferences. We have people to stand up and talk about their story. And one day I hope that will be me, but that's not me right now. That's me still hiding behind the network and pushing Les to do any sort of front thing. But I hope one day I will get there, and I will stand up and I will give us a voice.
Lindsay, I promise you this: when that day comes, I'll be in the audience cheering you on, darling. I no matter how we have to organize that, but I will be there. I promise you.
That's one in the audience then.
Yeah,
Nice,
no, and
thank
honestly,
you.
thank you so much for your time and for your inspirational story once again. I think we could have made this a 2-hour webinar, because I think there's so much more to talk about. You know, there's so many elements to this. You know, even the whole parent non-parent collaboration at work. So how do you find the balance there? Because, you know, sometimes parents feel, oh, you know, my childless colleague, you know, they can pick up the slack, or vice versa. There's loads of articles also going around around about that. There's loads of discussion going on about that, especially now again in these pandemic times. You know, the balance is almost kind of unbalancing again. So I think even now more than ever, I think we have great momentum also to kind of bring this voice back into the workplace, to really actually make our HR managers aware of the fact, hold on a minute, you know, there's so much focus on families and, you know, parents homeschooling and all that kind of stuff at this moment in time with everything that's going on. What about me?